everyone. Welcome to Hiking Footwear 101 with Oboz. Yay! Welcome, Christina, and thank you for joining us today. We're so thrilled to have you and to talk about hiking footwear. We're just gonna give you the mic and let you run with it. And
yeah, absolutely. So go ahead and take it from here.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Well, it's great to be here. I love getting out there and talking about hiking shoes, what to look for, getting fit. Like you alluded to at the beginning of this, I don't think a lot of hikers, backpackers, people that enjoy the outdoors really think about what's on their feet. And if they do, it's because their feet hurt probably. And so we would really like to try to avoid foot pain and get people into the best fitting footwear that they absolutely can. As I said, my name is Christina. I'm from Oboz Footwear. The information that I'm going to talk to tonight a little bit is Oboz specific, but I like to stress that a lot of this information, especially when we're talking about getting fit and measured properly, can really translate across the board to all brands. So even though I work for Oboz, don't feel like you have to go out and, buy a pair of Oboz just because you watch this. I think the big takeaway is buying something that fits your feet and that you feel great in. And we realize that we don't fit everybody. So I like to preface with that first. But what we'll talk about today is we'll go through the Oboz Fit DNA, what makes Oboz special. And then we'll go into getting measured, visiting your local retailer, looking at a Branic device and what those numbers mean to us and how they relate to footwear. And then we'll get into lows versus mids, what you should consider if you're a first-time shoe buyer or if you're wanting something completely different and you just haven't been satisfied with your shoes in the past. So start off with Oboz. Oboz is based out of Bozeman, Montana. That's where I am right now. My colleague Reagan is out there as well from Bozeman. Hi, Reagan. Good to see you. And it's an awesome company, started in the early 2000s. The big focus with this company is really on fit. The previous owner, the guy who started the company, John Connolly, actually went to Seattle Airport and he gathered tons of data from scanning people's feet at the gate, which is such a cool story. I absolutely love that. And what he found was the basic North American foot shape. So he gathered these metrics specifically from people that live here in North America, is that our foot shape is a V shape. I always like to have my foot skeleton available, but it is a V shape here. So narrow in the heel, wider in the forefoot. That is the basic Oboz Fit DNA. We want to match that data as best as possible. So what we did after finding that data was we narrowed the heel a little bit and we widened that forefoot, and we like to sculpt that midfoot. So you're really controlling the fit in the back here and then allowing the toes to splay out naturally to get better articulation and circulation into the rest of the foot. So no matter what style you end up with Oboz, you're always going to get that same basic fit, narrow in the heel, sculpted in the midfoot, and wider in the toes. So go in knowing that if you have a really, really wide foot, even wider in the heel, Oboz might not work out for you. Something like Keen might be a little bit better. And that kind of goes into finding your right size. So a lot of us, myself included, before I got into the footwear industry, always thought that my shoe size is a women's size 8 since like high school. And I'm sure that a lot of you probably haven't gotten measured since high school, but a lot of things change in that amount of time. A lot of us might change physical activity. That affects the foot shape. If you've been pregnant, that obviously affects the foot shape. As we get older, things just change. Gravity takes hold and our foot shape can definitely change just due to that. So getting regularly measured is really, really important. And like I said, I mean, before I started in the footwear industry, I probably was measured like once in high school, and it was my full length. So when we talk about getting measured, and this is, really important to call out here. There's tools on the internet where you can measure yourself at home. And we actually have a link on our YouTube channel that provides some information like that. But really going in, visiting your local retailer and having somebody actually take a look at your foot and measure your foot is really, really important. Not only can they use an actual Branic device, which is a really great starting point, but they also get to look at your physical foot. This Branic device is great. It's going to give us a few different measurements, but it's not going to tell us the story of the 3D shape of your foot. Somebody who's actually been working in footwear, who will take a look at your foot and measure it, can also just gather information from just looking at your foot and be like, oh, you have a higher volume top to bottom foot, or a lower volume foot. This shoe or this shoe might fit you better, and it's going to help with steering you in the right direction and something that's going to fit your foot really, really well. Going online is fine, and especially in these times where we're still kind of dealing with things and some people might not be comfortable in going to retail locations. So you could absolutely get a good fit online, but it's nothing like going into a physical location, having somebody look at your foot and trying on shoes then. So let's talk about this Branic device. This is really important. A lot of you who have been measured on a Branic device has really just been measured in the full length, and the full length of your foot is from the back of your heel here to the longest toe. For most people, that's your big toe right here. For some people, it's your middle toe. So that's your full length. And really, that's all a lot of people look at on a Branic device and call it good. There's more to the story behind the foot and how it relates to footwear beyond that. So getting your full foot measured, great. There's another measurement that's really important when you're talking about a Branic device here. So your full measurements are going to be these lines here, but there's also this slider. And I'm sure a lot of you who have gotten measured on a Branic device has always wondered what that is. To me, it was always some place to put your foot where it wouldn't slide off the device. But what this is, it's going to actually find your arch length. Arch length is from the back of the heel here to the first metatarsal head. So that's your big knuckle on your first toe. That's your metatarsal joint right there. That's where the foot flexes right there. So this is the entirety of your arch, just this section from here to the back of the heel here. And why that's important is a lot of people, relative to their full length, have a either longer or shorter arch proportion than what's relative to their full length. So meaning that your full length from the back of your heel to that long toe can be, let's say, a 10. But because of, evolution and how our foot has changed, some people have a longer arch, meaning that they measure at an 11 in their arch compared to their size 10 foot, meaning that they just have shorter toes and better for power as you walk and run. It's really, really common. And that's why it's really important to get your arch length, not only because of that, but all shoes, like hiking shoes that are structured, will more than likely have these engineered flex grooves in the midsole that allow the boot to bend in a specific place. If we're just going off of our full size, we're not really placing the flex zone of our foot in the proper place in relation to the shoe. So if I was, measuring at that full size in a 10, but my arch length was an 11 and I was trying a 10 on, then that means that arch placement, that flex zone placement on my foot is going to be misplaced in the shoe. And you're constantly then working against the flex point of the shoe, causing heel slip, blisters, and hot spots. So if you've ever experienced those things, let's say that you're not new to hiking, you've been buying hiking footwear for a while, but you're chronically plagued with hot spots, blisters, heel slip, and you just don't quite understand why. You've always tried a smaller size to get rid of that heel slip. Well, the answer is not a smaller size. It's actually matching that flex zone with the shoe, which actually usually means that you need to go a half size bigger to match better with your arch length. So as you go into your local retailer, especially if you go onto our website and you find a dealer locator who does Oboz, hopefully they'll have knowledge on the Branic device and they'll be able to find those measurements for you, the full length and the arch length. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering, well, if my full length is a 10 and my arch length is an 11, what size do I go with then? And the answer is to meet in the middle of those two measurements. So for that person who's measuring at a 10 in the full length and 11 in the arch length, start at a 10 and a half and see how that feels. Really pay attention to how the heel feels. And especially with Oboz Footwear, we have really great arch support in all of our insoles, whether, if that comes stock in your shoe or if you're buying our aftermarket insoles, we have really, really great, a nice medium arch here that fits most people. And so really paying attention to that arch placement, making sure that that feels great and it's not filling the entirety of the arch, just really supporting you underneath the middle of the arch. We should be good to go then. But hopefully that helps in getting you measured. And again, if you don't want to go into a physical retailer, we do have a video on our YouTube page that goes through step by step how to measure yourself at home and how to translate those numbers into shoe sizes. We will get that link to Karla and Phillip and make sure that you guys have that.
If you want to, you can add it to the chat. We will be also answering questions at the end of the conversation. So feel free to continue adding your questions and comments. But yes, if we can get that link, we will add it to the chat as well. So
perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, we'll get that over to you. I think Reagan's taking care of all the links for you guys. So we'll get that over to you. To wrap up measuring, I know I've gone through some pretty technical in the weeds kind of stuff. Hopefully it gives you a good starting point. What you find on the Branic device, it shouldn't be exactly what size you end up with. It's really what feels best to your foot. Again, the Branic device is just a good starting point, especially for those who are new and are just getting their first pair of hiking footwear, or if you've always been plagued with these chronic problems of heel slipping and hot spots and blisters. So good starting point. Always pay attention to how your foot feels in the shoe and go with what feels best. That's going to be your best answer there. So that rounds out measurement. Now let's get into how do you pick what kind of footwear to choose, especially if you're just starting out. There's an overwhelming amount of different types of footwear that you can choose from. Especially the different heights of footwear. I get this question a lot where people are like, oh, should I, do a low versus a mid, waterproof versus non-waterproof? And really, I start out with do what feels best for you and what you're comfortable with. If you're more comfortable with a more athletic feel, do a low. If you want something more structured and if you want to feel more secure, lean towards a mid. And then with the type of terrain that you're hiking in or that you'll constantly be hiking in, that'll definitely play into what if you want to do waterproof versus ventilated. Just really take those things into account and then talk with the associate that you're working with at the local retailer. They're definitely going to have knowledge of what they have on the wall, and they'll probably have information or at least knowledge of the area that you're going hiking in, especially if you're just hiking locally. They'll definitely be able to point you in the right direction. Lows versus mids. I really like this conversation because it's kind of based on common misconceptions that a mid-type boot is going to provide more ankle support. And that's not necessarily true. Mids are designed and intended to keep debris and water out of the top of the boot. You know, the mid top will increase the waterproof booty height. And then also it's just closing in a little bit more around the top of your ankle and leg, and will just help keep mud or dirt and debris out of the top. Ankle support actually really comes from the foundation of the shoe. So how stable you are from that outsole, and then also arch support. If your arches are constantly collapsing and falling in, that means that your ankle bone and your leg is going to follow suit. So if you're not supporting your arch, really you're increasing the chances of rolling your ankle. As soon as you, let's see if I did this right. I did. Last time I grabbed the wrong left, right, and this demonstration didn't quite work. So kudos to me. Super excited about that. As soon as you start to immobilize that arch slightly and reduce the amount of collapse that you get in your arch, that will help keep your ankle in an upright position and reduce your ankle from rolling in there. So really ankle support comes from the foundation, but you know, I think going back to that common misconception of it providing ankle support, I would say that, you know, if it's giving you peace of mind and it's more of a placebo effect, go for it. If it works for you, do it. But, you know, if you're somebody new and you're just not sure, just know that it doesn't really go too far into giving you more ankle support. It's just more about keeping debris out. So keep that in mind. Again, whatever your preference is, definitely go with this. This will just hopefully help arm you in making a better decision for what works best for you. For me, I need all the extra support that I can, even if it's not that much from a mid-top boot. So I should probably be in a mid-top boot. The lows just feel more comfortable to me. I just like having a little bit less around my ankle and around my foot and feeling like I have more mobility. So those are my 2 cents into low versus mid. We talked a little bit about ventilated versus waterproof, and I'm just checking questions real quick. Does Oboz have zero drop? You know, we don't do zero drop. The barefoot field isn't really our specialty, and there's definitely bigger players out there that have more expertise in that field of creating footwear that matches a more barefoot running natural gait. And we're not it. We have about an 8 millimeter heel to toe drop in most of our newer styles, and 15 millimeters in some of our legacy styles. So like the Bridger and the Sawtooth 2, those will all be 15 millimeters. The Sipes, if you want a casual shoe, the Bozeman, those will be 8 millimeters, and anything new coming out, from what I know, they're all going to be 8 millimeters moving forward. That might change, but to the best of my knowledge, that's where we're at right now. Any recommendations if we use hard plastic orthotics? I like hard plastic orthotics, especially Superfeet. I think they're great. Our insole is really, really similar to the blue Superfeet orthotic, just how it feels underfoot. My only complaint with hard plastic orthotics, especially in reference or in regard to our waterproof boots, is if you don't trim the plastic orthotic properly to the interior shape of the shoe, you might get some movement and it rubs a hole into the waterproof membrane. And at that point, it's not a warranty issue, you know. So I would say that use them, but use them with caution. If they work for you, great. Just know that it might cause some issues with your waterproof membrane. I've always worn Keens, but would like to try another brand. Does Oboz have a wide toe box? Yeah, absolutely. So the difference between Oboz and Keen, I really like this question because we are really similar when you look at us on the wall. I think our aesthetic is kind of similar, the mesh and the leather. But, we do differ in fit. We do have a wide toe box like Keen, but where our fit differs is when you get into the back half of the shoe here. So, from pretty much the instep here all the way back to the heel is completely different from Keen. Keen is wide throughout the entirety of the shoe. So if you have a really, really wide foot, north of a double E, Keen would be great because it's accommodating for the width of the entire foot. I feel like people that have an average width might struggle with Keen, just getting a nice secure fit around the entire foot because you can't really crank on those shoelaces as much. But if you're just looking for a wide toe box, you shouldn't have a problem with Oboz. We even have a wide width. So if a regular width doesn't work for you, try a wide. We only wide in the toe box. We actually don't widen out in the back. If you go back to that story that I told you about John Connolly measuring people's feet and scanning feet and getting all that data, he found that even if you have a wide foot up to a double E, the back part of the foot doesn't widen. Only when you get past that double E does the whole entire foot widen. So if you're, again, just looking for the wide toe box, Oboz should be good to go. Give it a shot. Cool.
So it looks like we've got lots of kudos so far. For there, a lot of people are saying really great things they're learning today. So regarding different types of shoes for different types of weather, how about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's go back to the ventilated versus waterproof discussion. I really like this too, because I think, a lot of people's expectation comes from apparel and it doesn't necessarily translate to footwear that well. Most people think of waterproof and they think of Gore-Tex and they think of rain jackets and ski shells and all of that. When we move into footwear, it's kind of a completely different beast. A waterproof membrane isn't just a rain jacket. It's a rain jacket with foam on top of that, with a leather motorcycle jacket on top of that. And so the breathability issue really comes into play when we're talking about footwear. So, really evaluate the terrain that you're going to be in, and also heat and humidity levels. If you live somewhere where it's really, really hot, really, really humid, and you're going to be in a really wet place for a really long time, don't get waterproof. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but what that waterproof will actually do in those types of circumstances is your boot's not going to be able to fully dry out in the amount of time that you need it to. So let's say overnight, the inside of your boot has gotten wet. It's still kind of hot and humid. More than likely, your boot's just not going to dry out by morning time. A ventilated boot, though, you have a better chance of it fully drying out because you don't have those extra layers in the inside of the boot preventing the vapor to escape out. So that's a really good example of when not to buy waterproof. If you are buying waterproof, though, that's always a good option for you if, here in Montana and where I'm originally from, Wyoming, it's not really humid. It's pretty darn dry, actually. In the springtime, we do get some insane runoff, though. And so you'll have more creek crossings than you would later in the season. At that point, I would say get a waterproof boot, especially if you don't think that the water levels are going to be over the top of the boot and you feel like your creek crossings are going to stay well below the actual top of the boot. Go for it. And if it's a pretty dry environment, that's great. That's going to allow your boot to dry out faster. So it's the total environment that you're going to be in, and then your opportunity to dry your boots. When you're drying your boots, this brings up a really good point. Don't ever dry your boots with a heat source. That includes putting your boots next to the fire at night, putting your boots next to a heat vent thing on the ground, words, but you know what I'm talking about, the heat vent. Don't do that. Dryer, not good. What ends up happening when you apply heat to a boot to dry out is the materials on the upper here tend to shrink, especially if it's leather. This will end up shrinking. And then a lot of the adhesives, the glues, chemicals in the upper part of the boot will be affected by that. And more often than not, you'll start to get delamination, especially in like the toe area and any place on the side where you have the outsole wrapping up. So avoid heat. What we recommend is to take out the insole. You can just grab right at the arch there. The insole comes completely out. Take this out, unlace completely, pull open the tongue as much as possible, and then set it on its side. And that'll help dry out as fast as you possibly can, especially in the backcountry. If you have something to stuff in there, like if you're at home, you can stuff newspaper or brown tissue into the inside, and that'll help dry it out better. So I think the takeaways from that is just know the environment that you're going to be in, and also your expectation of time between when you take off your boots and when you're going to hike next. And then just have good ways to dry out your boots. Does that answer your question on waterproof versus ventilated?
Yeah, we're looking at the chat. We actually have some more questions that came through, but we'll look out for if it answered the question.
Christina, I have a question. I've used kind of a rule of thumb, and maybe you can let us know if that's kind of accurate. But I've always used the rule of thumb of when you put your foot in to the shoe, just to make sure that you have the right size, you don't want more than a 1/4 inch heel lift. And then the other thing that I usually did, again, let me know if these are incorrect myths, but I also tapped my toes and with the boot on, and just make sure that my toes were not hitting the front. Are those two rules of thumb that you would also recommend, or could you touch on those?
Yeah, absolutely. That brings up some great points. So when trying on footwear, I'll say this, the tapping your toes, great. If they have a ramp or even stairs, even better. That really matches what your foot does when you're actually out there on the trail by flexing and, going downhill or uphill at the same time. I'll just put this in there. This isn't really a question that you asked, but it's popped up now in my head. Go closer to the end of the day, middle of the afternoon to evening. This is when your foot is its biggest size. Feet expand about 1/4 to 1/2 size throughout the day, depending on activity level, elevation change, temperature, what you ate the night before. If you had a taco party with a whole bunch of margaritas, the next day your foot might be swollen. This will just help simulate that swollen foot and make sure that your shoe isn't going to be too small by the end of the day. But yeah, so the tapping your toes, really great to do. The rule of thumb for me though, so we talked about the Branic Device and what your foot should feel like in the inside of the shoe. That's really, really important, and that should take precedence over the rule of thumb. The rule of thumb for me is you should have about, like a full thumb's to a 1/2 a thumb's width in between the end of your longest toe and the toe box. That isn't necessarily the case for some people. So let's go back to the whole full length versus arch length discussion. As I had mentioned, most people have a longer arch length than they do what's relative to their full length. Some people, though, have a shorter arch length than what's relative to their full length, meaning that they have longer toes. So if we're doing that thing, we're trying to match between an arch length and a full length. We're at that point, if somebody has longer toes with a shorter arch, you're really taking up all the space that you possibly can inside the toe box. You might not have that luxury of the space between the end of your toe and the toe box. But it is a good thing to check because, you know, when you go downhill, you definitely don't want your toes to be banging. But what Oboz does, and I find this really important, is going back to the fit DNA. When we sculpt that midfoot and we narrow that heel, we're really locking the foot into place, and it doesn't give the foot a lot of opportunity to slide forward in the boot. And that's also aided by the arch support too. So that also helps keep you locked into the heel pocket. But it also, you know, if you don't have arch support and that arch is collapsing, it's actually causing your foot to elongate, and that causes toe bump as well. So since we're taking care of the arch, again, we're not worrying too much about extra room for your foot to elongate as you take each step. But the rule of thumb for me is more of a thumb's width in between the end of the toe and the toe box. However you find that though, some people stick their thumb in the back of the boot. You can do that in multiple ways. I would say use it, but don't let it be your guiding piece of information, I would say.
We've got lots of questions. Is there an Oboz style that you would recommend for rocky class 2-3 scrambling? I currently have the sawtooth too low and don't really like them for bouldering, scrambling, but they are great for established trail hikes.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually recommend, do I have one? I do have one. Look at that. Oh no. There we go. I like the Arete, and that's spelled A-R-E-T-E. The difference between this and the Sawtooth 2 that person has is going to be the outsole shape. It's a pretty lightweight shoe. It looks really athletic. It's actually intended for thru hikers. So you have something really, really lightweight that feels like a trail runner. But what we did here was we made the outsole torsionally rigid. So you have that, and you also have a pretty high surface area outsole. So that's going to really help with scrambling. You know, again, I think it goes back to that personal preference. We do have intended end uses for all of our footwear. But I would say, you know, what you're comfortable in, definitely go with that route. But for me, if I was scrambling, I would choose the Arete. There are some things coming down the pike, though, this spring that you all will see in the next couple months. Yeah, I'm just checking the date here. And I think that would be a good option for you too. I'm not going to give anything away, but our new launch coming in April is going to be pretty awesome, and I would say that is going to be an incredible option for anybody scrambling. It's just, in my opinion, a really good quiver killer. It's a good shoe for everything, so I'd recommend that. Or my last recommendation would be the Sipes shoe. It's in that same category of like a quiver killer. Again, you do optimize the amount of surface area on the outsole. And it's with this, we're using a lightweight polyurethane in the midsole versus a foam. And so again, it gives you that nice rigidity in the midsole that you need for something like that.
Thank you. We have more questions.
So another question that came in is, do you have any recommendations, as I sometimes suffer with plantar fasciitis with my left foot if I'm hiking for a long time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any style in the Oboz line is going to cover that. As I stated before, at some point when I was talking, all of our styles come stock with arch support in the insole. So it's this insole specifically. Plantar fasciitis is an irritation in the tissues that are at the bottom of the foot, and it's caused typically by those tissues being overstretched, which results from your arch collapsing. So if you control that arch collapsion, I'm having issues with that word today. with the insole, you're good to go. If you don't want to buy a new pair of shoes, we have, I just had it, oh, it dropped on the ground here. Our aftermarket insoles here. They're trim to fit. So you just take the insole that exists in your shoe out, place it. This is not, here we go, we'll do this today. Place it on top of your new insole that you bought, trace it with a pen, trim with some scissors, and you can drop it in and go. And this will add arch support to your existing shoes. And you're only investing $30 with our $35 with our aftermarket insole here. So this is a great way to do that. But like I said, all of our styles have that in there. So whatever feels best for your foot, go with that.
Are all waterproof boots leather?
No. That's a really good question. No, so the waterproof part of the shoe doesn't come from the amount of open space or pores in the upper material. Waterproof comes from, bear with me, everybody. A Mary Poppins bag of tricks over here. And I think, of course, it's at the very bottom of my bag. So this is what makes your boots waterproof. This is our specific waterproof membrane. It's a polyurethane membrane. Most companies, Keen, Merrill, anybody that doesn't use Gore-Tex, they're using this. Gore-Tex also uses something that looks like this, but it's stretched Teflon. And the difference is some pores per square inch. But yeah, this can be applied into a boot that, where did I just have those? I think I dropped them somewhere. Oh yeah, here we go. That has mesh just like this. Or it can be dropped into a full leather boot like this. Like I said, the upper material doesn't create the waterproofness. It's what's on the inside that counts. So if for some reason, you're looking at other brands besides Oboz will be Be Dry. That's our waterproof membrane, and it's tagged on all of our shoes that are waterproof. It'll be usually like in this area, or if it's a low, at the cuff here. It'll be there. Most other companies will have it called out on their shoes somewhere. If it's waterproof or Gore-Tex. If it's water resistant shoe, you don't have this fun piece of technology in there. You just have a coating on the outside that'll eventually wear off. So if you are looking for specifically waterproof, just make sure you're finding the tag there or asking a sales associate that works at the retailer, and they'll point you in the right direction. But this is what counts here.
Okay. Let's see. We have another question. One of my feet is one size smaller than the other. Any suggestions on how to accommodate the arch of my smaller one? Yeah, definitely.
So, full size, I mean, that's getting to the point where it's pretty significant. You could, I wouldn't think that a retailer is going to help you in the cost of this, but you could buy the aftermarket insoles. You'd have to buy 2 pairs of these though, because our aftermarket is slightly different than what comes stock in all of our shoes. It just has an extra layer of memory foam here, and it's going to feel weird if you have one in one shoe and this in the other shoe. So you'd have to buy 2 insoles, one to fit your one foot, the other to fit the other foot. And then you just obviously trim them, and then they can drop in, and they'd fit into your shoes perfectly. But a size difference, I would say try them on first before going this route. Identify where the arch support is hitting you. So on my fancy little skeleton foot here, if you all can see this, there's like a little shelf right here. It's directly under your ankle bone. If you draw a straight line from your ankle bone to the ground, that's where you should start to feel the arch support. And it can vary probably from there to like maybe back there. It can vary a little bit. So if you're within that range, I would say you're good. I wouldn't try to mess with this. I think you're probably, cutting hairs, splitting hairs at that point. So just try them on first, see how it feels. If things feel pretty good, I would say go with it. Because the other thing that this insole is going to do as you wear it is the material is going to soften a little bit and kind of adjust to your foot shape. So, breaking in, it just might need that in order for it to feel better. When you get past that size difference, that's when I'd recommend going this route. But a size, I don't know if it would warrant actually investing in multiple pairs of orthotics, but it might be something to play around with.
Thank you.
On that note, we have another question here about how often should we replace the arch support insoles?
Yeah, that's another question that we get quite often. Here at Oboz, we actually design all the components of our footwear to wear out roughly around the same time. So if your insole is wearing out, more often than not, the midsole material, this foam material right here, is going to wear out at the same time. And the outsole will start to break down and the upper materials will start to get soft and all that good stuff. So if you're experiencing that your arch support is starting to decline, I would just say it might be at that point in time to look for a new pair of shoes. If you look at your shoes, though, you feel like your arch support is wearing out, and you look at your shoes and you don't have like any creases or pock marks in the midsole and your outsole looks great, and you can justify buying a new pair of insoles, I would say, depending on use, like replacing them like once every few years, year and a half or so. That's a pretty good indication. Just pay attention to it. If your feet start to feel more fatigued than they usually do on the trail, then I'd evaluate what your boot condition is like. And then you can buy a new insole if you think that you can get more life out of your boots that way.
So then is it a myth, or, I've heard stories around you should be changing your shoes out every 600 miles or something like that. I mean, is there truth to that? I mean, especially when it comes to hiking boots, I feel like I've had some hiking boots that have lasted me a long, long time.
Yeah.
So
mileage is kind of an odd thing to think about when you're talking about boot life. There's a lot of variables that go into how fast a boot will degrade. First of all, it's the variables that you add to the boot. So your body weight and how much of a load that you're putting on your person. So that means, if you're backpacking more and putting a heavier weight on, that'll, decrease the life of a boot. Your sweat content of your foot, that sounds gross, but there's acid in your sweat. Some people have more acidic sweat than other people. And especially if you're wearing your boots day after day after day, if you're doing, a longer backpacking trip or a through hike, your boots are going to wear down faster than if you're just, getting out there on the weekends and doing these day hikes. So the frequency of which the sweat is in your boot and how acidic your sweat is will also affect that. I know some companies are like, yeah, I have, we have a 500-mile life expectancy of our boots, and this particular style has 1,000-mile life expectancy. I try not to put that label on boots just because, it's just hard to tell. Materials do have an effect on that. So like I was saying with the sipes that I was holding up earlier, this particular shoe right here, indicating that has an ultralight polyurethane midsole compared to a general EVA foam midsole. The polyurethane is going to outlast the EVA. So knowing what the boot is made of is going to help you in determining how long the boot is going to last.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have someone wrote in a question about, she said she loves her Oboz boots. Can you recommend a way to tie them that will stabilize them? Her issue is that the pinky toenails get pretty roughed up if she doesn't tighten it up really tight. And then she says sometimes tying it up super tight can also be uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. There's multiple different tying techniques that you can incorporate to help the fit of your boots. Sounds like with the pinky toe is getting pretty roughed up. If I don't tie them pretty tight, maybe a heel locking tying technique would be good on, I'm just seeing if I have a shoe that would be a good example of this. I don't want to show that yet. That's gonna.
Do you have, well, before you go, do you guys have on your blog maybe like different techniques or different tying techniques? Because that would be an awesome thing or link for us to share with the community.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have Reagan put some links in there. I think might have a blog if I'm remembering correctly. And I do believe we have a YouTube video as well that shows different tying techniques. The heel lock would help this person with mid boots. We'll send the link and everything. The heel lock is going to be in this area right here, where you're kind of looping through the laces that have already been inserted through the eyelets here. That just helps keep your heel back there. In a low top, the heel lock is up here at the very top too. But yeah, the video, I don't want to unlace all these. I don't think would have enough time here to go through that.
Yeah,
we'll make sure it is in there for sure.
Also, just a quick reminder to everyone who's watching, do not forget to cut your toenails or trim your toenails before you start, especially if you're going to go on a long day hike and going to be doing a lot of elevation gain and loss, because that causes like not only like lost toenails, but pain. Sometimes, like I know when I'm hiking downhill, my one of my nails will start digging into my actual foot fingernail and cutting, it'll cut. So anyways, just a little reminder that I've learned along my years of hiking is I always try to make sure I trim before I go.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. And the other thing that's coming to mind with this person too is it might not be a tying thing. They might have a higher arch than a medium arch height, which is what our insoles are. They might need a higher arch support that reduces how much their arch is collapsing. As your arch collapses and your foot elongates, the pinky toe is actually where it elongates most. So if you're having rubbing and discomfort on the pinky toe, maybe evaluate your arch support too. That'd be my other tip to that person.
That's wonderful. Okay. Looks like Oboz did go ahead and add a video of different techniques. So check out the comments. Cool. Perfect. And then do you want to take a quick look at some of these other questions we have here?
I'll ask this one too about, someone asked, should we do a whole size bigger or half a size bigger if going with boots?
Neither. Again, this goes back to getting measured, having that starting point, and then going with what best fits or feels best on your foot. Going in with the notion that you're you have to size up a half size or a full size, I think it's just going to get you into trouble. So sorry, there's a fly here. So I would just go in, get measured, get fitted by somebody in the footwear department, and then just make sure that you have some toe room, especially if you don't have that issue of your arch being shorter and your toes being longer, and that you don't have heel slip. But yeah, I definitely don't recommend having a rule of thumb of sizing up or sizing down.
Yeah. And I'll probably add on there, make sure you bring in the proper socks that you're going to be wearing for those shoes. If you go in, if you have, let's say dress socks and they're thin and you're going to go after work, and, you should definitely have your, your wool socks or something, your thicker socks that you're going to be wearing. Make sure that you get the right size.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I am going to address one real quick. Put them in your sleeping bag to dry them out. Probably not.
Yeah.
The sleeping bag material isn't really especially like down, even synthetic isn't really wicking enough to do anything, and it's going to make your sleeping bag moist
And smelly.
And I
smelly.
don't know if you're on a long trip, if you want to deal with that the entire time. Maybe, and I haven't tried this, I just had this thought the other day. If you have like a pair of socks that you've already worn that aren't too dirty, especially if they're wool, stuff your boots with those wool socks. The wool will help pull moisture out. But yeah, definitely not sleeping bags.
Well, we're still getting a few more questions here. Just when I thought we couldn't learn more about shoes, here we go. We've got more. All right, trail
Love
runners.
it.
Yes, what exactly are trail runners, and does Oboz have those?
We do not. So again, this kind of goes back to the barefoot question. There are other players in the footwear industry that have more expertise on trail running. Running versus hiking and walking have different biomechanics, and it's just really not our place to be in. You know, there's definitely big brands out there that do a really good job of trail running. What we do focus on, and something that we are focusing on more, is our fast and light category. So going back to that arete, I wouldn't run in these. Certainly wouldn't run these, but this is the solution for people that like to hike in trail runners, which is just essentially a trail runner is like a road shoe with better traction on the bottom, and sometimes they can have bruise plates on the bottom as well, just some extra protection underneath the forefoot. And then again, they're softer and they flex more for running biomechanics, whereas the arete more aimed towards hiking. So if you do like that trail runner feel or that athletic feel, but you want more protection, this is a really great opportunity to try something that's different than a trail runner.
Thank you. All right, well, we've got, just a couple more minutes here, and I don't know, I see a couple more little questions there. I don't know if there's something in there you'd like to answer or address.
What is a more natural feeling, shoe or boot? Not very rigid. I would say that we don't have a lot of boots that are not particularly rigid when we're talking about hiking. Again, the arete, it's more modeled after a trail runner, and it does give that more athletic feel, but we do want that rigidity in our outsoles. If I would try them on, just see what you think, and if it's not for you, then it's not for you, and I'd try maybe a different brand.
I have a question. Sometimes I'll get different shoes, boots that might have a shank or something that actually has some sort of plate in there for some rocks. Does Oboz have a particular brand, or a particular style that has like a little more support for rocks?
Yeah, definitely. So I will say this, all Oboz footwear, you mentioned a shank, has a shank in it, and I'd say most hiking footwear would have a shank in it unless you're getting to something that's really soft. What the shank does is it will provide rigidity and protection underfoot, but the shank is really there to help flex that boot at the 3/4 spot. That's why a lot of times they'll be referred to as a 3/4 nylon shank. It just really helps the shoe break at the 3/4 spot. This outsole package that I'm holding right here is found on our Bridger collection. So this particular style right here. And what it has is this really cool rock plate that is incorporated into the bottom of the midsole here. So this is a rock plate. You'll get protection underneath the forefoot, underneath the arch, and it also helps cradle the metatarsals and just provide more support for the metatarsals in general, as well as rock and root poke through. So the Bridger is a really great option for that. The arete, I keep on saying that one, and I hope I can find it fast here. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah, we're fans of wearing, when we're doing shorter day hikes, we really like that feel, of like a trail runner.
Yeah, definitely.
Something fast and light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, exactly what that arete is meant for,
Yeah.
fast and light. I keep on saying, it has that rigidity in the outsole here, which is actually, it's technically in the midsole if we're digging into the weeds. But it does have kind of that same thing where it has that structure from that rock plate, but then it also has this additional area in the forefoot here too, which will help from poke through from rocks and roots. So the arete overall, it's just one of my favorites. I think it fits really well, and it just provides that support without it feeling like a traditional hiking boot.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much. We'll close it out with this last question. Someone says they had recently read about approach shoes. Can you expand on that for slippery rocks, boulders, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. I like talking about approach shoes. I'm just trying to see if I have my pair in here. I don't think that I do. So we don't necessarily make approach shoes. Approach shoes are typically used by rock climbers who have a pretty intense scramble / hike up to where their climb is. And essentially what it has an outsole that's pretty similar to this, with a really flat zone right here for smearing and scrambling. And it's really, really rigid too. So if you are doing some low grade climbing without switching into your climbing shoes, it allows you to put that weight on the toe and push off without the shoe flexing and collapsing. So for slippery rocks, I mean, it depends on the outsole, the rubber compound. Most companies that make approach shoes have a pretty sticky rubber compound, and it'd be good for slippery rocks and boulders. So if that's something you're interested in, there's quite a few brands out there that make approach shoes: La Sportiva, Scarpa, Salewa, just to name a few if you're interested in looking at them.
Yeah. Well, it's 6. We definitely want to respect your time, Christina. So just a quick little note, return policies, someone asked about them, and I'm pretty sure they really depend on what retailer you buy them at. Our sponsor is REI, and they do have a great 1-year policy, and they sell Oboz. I also love that they have the rock that you can go up and down and test your shoes on. When we go try out shoes, we always go use it so we can see how we feel when we're going downhill, when we're climbing uphill. So yeah, I mean, this has been really awesome. I think that's correct, right? It's just dependent upon the return policy of the store that they buy it at.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a warranty policy. We don't necessarily take back shoes from other, like, that were sold from other retailers if it's not a warranty issue. Some retailers will have like a comfort guarantee, and that's great and awesome if they do. But yeah, if it's warranty though, definitely try to go through the retailer first. It's quicker, but you can go directly through Oboz. Yeah, I would just say check out your retailer and see what their policy is first. And then if you're still having issues, like, definitely get a hold of our customer service team. They're really great on helping out and trying to accommodate as best as possible if there is an issue.
Well, just, I hope you get to read these comments. People, our community just absolutely has so many positive things to say, and thank you so much.
Christina.
For Erica, the name of the light trail runner was the arete? The arete. Okay, there we go. So if you guys can watch this video again, we're going to post it on YouTube. We're going to add the replay to our newsletter. And thank you so much, Christina. Thank you, Oboz. Thank you to our amazing community. And we do have a talk next week with Nick Wax, which is going to be talking all about how to waterproof your gear, re-waterproof, and also how to clean your shoes. So we're excited for that. Join us next week on Thursday, same channel, same time, and we'll see you later.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.